This is Raphael's School of Athens. When you first look at this painting, your eyes are immediately drawn to the two figures at the center, Plato and Aristotle, whose writings serve as the foundation for pretty much all of Western philosophy. But after your eyes settle on those two figures, where do they drift next? I think the large amount of negative space around this figure here seems to make him the next most attractive in the painting. So who is this figure whom Raphael seems to place second only to Plato and Aristotle? This is Diogenes of Sinope, and it makes sense that everyone is giving him a wide berth because he probably smells horrible. You see, Diogenes was homeless. He lived in the ancient equivalent of a garbage can. He was also a bitter old crank who tormented almost everyone who crossed his path. He was also one of the most insightful philosophers the world has ever known. Diogenes was a harsh critic of Plato and Socrates. When Plato stated Socrates' definition of man as featherless biped, Diogenes plucked the chicken and threw it at Plato, proclaiming, "Behold, I give you Socrates' man." Embarrassed by this, Plato added, "with broad, flat nails," to the definition of man. Diogenes actually got Plato, one of the most brilliant men who ever lived, to define humanity in terms of our fingernails. Whereas Plato tried to present a picture of humanity as enlightened and elevated from nature, Diogenes suggested that man should try to live in harmony with nature. Plato said that civilization and government enabled man to live a more noble life than that of the dog. Diogenes said that the dog was the perfect model of virtue for how we ought to live, congenitally happy, not obsessed with material things. Dogs lived in the present with sincerity and without pretension or hypocrisy. If only we could say as much about humanity. Like Socrates, Diogenes wrote nothing, choosing to live his philosophy rather than transcribe it. Acting like a dog earned him the epithet Diogenes the Dog. The Greek word for dog was kion, the adjective of which is kionikos, which is the root for the modern name of his philosophy, cynicism. Diogenes' behavior was eccentric, to say the least. He once took a lit lantern around the streets of Athens in broad daylight. When asked what he was doing, he claimed he was looking for an honest man, but couldn't seem to find one. This was an image that Nietzsche would later borrow for his parable of the madman looking for God. Diogenes was notorious for masturbating in public. When brought before the judge to defend himself, he responded, "If only it were so easy to soothe my hunger by rubbing my belly." Perhaps Diogenes' most famous exploit occurred when Alexander the Great came to meet this wise philosopher whom he had heard so much about. When Alexander found Diogenes, he was rooting around in the trash. "What are you doing?" Alexander asked. "Why would this wise philosopher be crawling through garbage?" Diogenes responded, "I am looking for the bones of your father, but I can't distinguish them from the bones of his slaves." This was Alexander the Great. He's the most powerful man in the world, and Diogenes just insulted his father. And did I mention that Alexander had some serious daddy issues? All he had to do was snap his fingers, and Diogenes would have been tortured for the rest of his life. You cannot hurt Diogenes. Diogenes is invincible. He does not care in the slightest what you do to him. Thankfully, Alexander was a contemplative man, possibly due to the influence of his tutor Aristotle on him when he was young, so he really sat down with Diogenes in the gutter and talked. After a long conversation, Alexander was so impressed that, standing up, he offered Diogenes anything he desired. Money, power, women, name it and it was his. Diogenes responded, "Would you mind stepping aside? You're standing in my sunlight." Just as Diogenes was immune to the threat of punishment, he was impervious to the temptations of power. Walking away, Alexander turned to his court retainer and said, "Were I not Alexander, I would be Diogenes." Think about that for a moment. The most powerful man in the world is envying a homeless man. That's the power of philosophy right there. Next time someone tells you that philosophy is useless, tell them about Diogenes.